Thank you, Dean. Yeah, so today me and my colleague will be showing you a bit about a large dotCMS application suite project that we did for a customer, LaSer Netherlands. First, let me introduce Isaac a little bit. We're a dotCMS partner based in the Netherlands. We started in 1999. We have about 50 employees, and we're crazy about internet and open source. And it's also one of the reasons why we are proud of our partnership with dotCMS, but also with, for example, JBoss and Magento, two other large open source providers that also have enterprise support on their products. We, as Isaac, what we do with dotCMS, we have been using dotCMS since the 1.7 era. And for now, we look at dotCMS as a key strategic partner in our portal and website business. So as Isaac, we build large-scale enterprise websites with dotCMS. We spend a lot of time constructing web-based customer self-service portals here in the Northern European region. We build intranet applications with dotCMS. We build white label solutions, web shops, and we integrate them with Magento, JBoss, and other open source platforms. Well, some of our clients are, for example, Shell Global Outpost Services. So the extranet solution for Shell is a dotCMS based application. Other clients of us are KPN, Royal Dutch Telecom, Miele, Express Bank, and Delta Lloyd. Miele and Delta Lloyd are also two clients that run dotCMS and that we service with solutions. The case we are talking about today is for LaSer. This Europe, this is quite a well-known company that is, we are working for them in the United Kingdom, in the Nordic region, mainly in Denmark, and in the Netherlands. LaSer is a large Visa and Mastercard credit provider. They also provide prepaid cards, also Visa and Mastercard. They are quite large in consumer loans and creative consumer loan products here in the European region. Today we will be looking at an application suite for consumer loans, so customers can go online to one of their websites and apply for a loan directly online there, and that is a dotCMS application. LaSer also does a lot of retail financing, so financing goods that customers can buy at large department stores, etc. They have loyalty programs, and important is that they are a subsidiary of BNP Paribas, which is actually the largest bank here in Europe. At the bottom of the screen, you see an example of some of the cards, the Visa cards that they are offering in the UK and in the Netherlands. Yeah, as I just told you, LaSer Netherlands, bottom left, are part of BNP Paribas, and they have a number of websites. Directa.nl is their direct-to-consumers loan website, and that's what we will be showing you today. Okay, so we are going to take a look at the project. This sheet, I think, is quite important as it tries to give you a glimpse of the challenges the customer put us up with. LaSer Netherlands had a lot of loan application modules, but they were not flexible and they were also not content manageable. So one of the main challenges they gave us is we need much more flexibility in setting up application wizards or application suites, questions on a screen that you need to answer to apply for a financial product. They also said, well, we really want to do A/B testing to see what has the best usability, what order of questions works best for applying for a customer loan, what questions do we want to leave out, and what other questions do we want to put back in. They also told us our marketing team needs to be able to make these changes without having to do code rolls on our web portals all the time. And the application process itself should support high volumes of website visits, since they want to run campaigns, they want to be able to put banners on sites like Google or Hotmail and get a lot of customers to their sites and run them through the application suites. But most of all, they still want to use a reliable process and utilize the rules that are in their existing JBoss middleware. and use the backend systems they have had in place for years. Those are mainly IBM and Oracle-based systems. So they want a flexible application module on top of existing middleware, using rules, etc., and also data from the middleware and from the existing backend systems. Well, our answer to them was, in essence, let's put everything in dotCMS. Everything being all front-end related stuff for this application suite, for the website that leads to the application module, etc., etc. A little more detail. We use dotCMS for the content of the application suite wherever possible. So that is for the questions, for marking mandatoriness, for ordering questions on pages, for result pages, etc., etc. We created dotCMS-based view tools to link dotCMS to the existing middleware and get data like acceptable nationality codes, etc., from the middleware. For performance reasons, we set up a 2-node clustered dotCMS here. This is an enterprise edition of dotCMS that uses a 2-node cluster here with a load balancer in front of it. And we kept the existing Java messaging service transport layer. This is a connection between the middleware, the JBoss middleware, and the front end. We wanted to keep JMS there as the middleware is very fast in accepting messages over JMS. And using the flexibility of dotCMS and view tools, etc., we were able to combine the content and flexibility power of dotCMS with the existing middleware. We also created some dotCMS plugins in Java to restrict what the marketing department can do, so that they are able to configure a module, but not really break an application process due to making changes in dotCMS that they shouldn't do. We also used the stylable dotCMS admin interface to make managing these modules straightforward to them. So this is a high-level overview of the infrastructure as it is in place for LaSer Netherlands. There's a load balancer based on Apache at the top. Then there's a dotCMS cluster that runs the applications. That's the one here to the right. Of course, we also have self-service and prepaid service, etc. Then there is interaction with JBoss-based middleware. This middleware is called Pangea. It's also one of the products we provide LaSer with. And there are IBM and Oracle systems at the bottom that drive actually the core of this. But the dotCMS is the most important presentation layer here. This picture shows you that there are 2 nodes, node 1 and node 2, that run their own dotCMS instance, are serviced by a load balancer, and they synchronize using the dotCMS cache synchronization mechanism. And they also share a SQL database where the content and assets, etc., are stored. Both nodes communicate with the middleware. A little more detail on how the backend, the middleware, and dotCMS combine up to create this solution. Some metadata for running an application module is coming from the backend system. For example, acceptable nationalities or acceptable surname prefixes. Here in Holland, that's a big thing with all the people having a surname like Van blah 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 or Van de blah blah blah. So those surname prefixes are also a backend system parameter. There is middleware that in forms of acceptable checks on things like email addresses and how they should be validated. And there's the dotCMS frontend that has the complete setup of the application module, the order of questions, but it also has a lot of other presentation stuff that we will be seeing in the demo that we'll be doing right after this sheet. And of course, the module is rendered on the client PC using some additional libraries like jQuery to put nice effects in it, fade in, fade out effects, AJAX calls to the backend going through dotCMS, etc. So this is actually everything that combines up to display the application module we'll be seeing. Thank you so far. Let's go to the demo. Okay, so let me take you to the front end of the website where customers of LaSer can apply for their loan or their credit card, but in this case we'll be showing a loan application. Customers end up on this website and they will be given information. This is all in dotCMS, this website, about the various financial products that LaSer offers.
Okay.
Important, of course.
And if I could interrupt just for 1 second, just for the people who have arrived maybe late during the meeting, could you just tell me what is the application process? What is the goal of the end user? This is a credit card, application process, correct?
Exactly, that is correct. The main goal of the end customer who wants to apply for a card or a personal loan, a credit, is to get the correct rating and to also be presented with a contract here right online directly after filling in the application module that we built in dotCMS and the middleware. This process is entirely online and real time, and it integrates with a number of backend systems to actually score the customer.
What kind of other credit evaluation companies are you communicating with?
Well, there's a number of steps in the process, but once a customer has filled in the dotCMS based application module, the middleware gets a signal from dotCMS and then it kicks off a number of scoring calls. An important one is to Experian, which you probably also know in the United States.
Yes.
A very important one here in Holland is PKR. This is an agency where all credits that are offered in the Netherlands are registered. So it helps LaSer to determine if they should give this credit to the customer. Another important one is VIS. This actually checks if an ID document is still valid and if there are specific fraud situations relating to the application that's being done by the customer. So together, this gives LaSer enough scoring information to make a decision online, which is then also fed back through the middleware back to dotCMS, which can show the appropriate result page.
Okay, that's great. Let's take a look at the application process you set up.
Okay. Well, this page you're seeing here, of course, it's in Dutch, so sorry for that. It offers two products. So let's select one of them, and a customer can parameterize a little bit of their loan here in a calculator that's also fully built in dotCMS. So let's say that they want about 30,000 euros here. They get an APR of 5.6%, which is pretty good. And this the result you see here at the bottom, 40,000 euros, is the total amount they need to pay for this loan. This is calculated in a mainframe. It's actually an IBM system at the back that's doing these financial calculations, but they are fed with data from dotCMS. So everything like the labels here, the styling, these little help buttons you see, but also the positioning on the page, this is all configurable by the marketing department of LaSer the way they want it. And only the hookup to the middleware is done through plugins and view tools in dotCMS. So let's apply for this amount. Here you see that now we're applying or coming into the applications tree. So this is the most complex dotCMS setup of this project. There's quite a large number of questions, of course, all in Dutch, but I think it helps to just think of this as a card or loan application process. You have to say if you're a man or a woman, and you fill in your name and your date of birth, etc., etc. So there's quite a lot of fields here. There's actually even two steps. So the first step one here, in Dutch we write step with an A, but the first step is your name and your address details and email address, etc. Step two, you see here, is more about your financial situation. So what is your income? What is the income of your wife? What's your bank do you get some things like alimony or a 13th-month bonus, etc., etc. So all of that is needed to score the loan. Okay, so this here is our test server where we can show you the process of filling in the application module. One of the neat things, for example, is that it does a lookup of address details. So if I enter a postal code, let's enter my own postal code here, it will do a lookup through the middleware of the street and town where I'm living. So this is also a little bit of integration between the front end jQuery, dotCMS, and the middleware. Other interesting fields are, for example, the one here, nationality. Acceptable nationalities are coming from the backend, but the LaSer marketing department wanted to override the ugly system-like names for nationalities that they have. We'll be showing you later on in the dotCMS backend how this is done in content. For example, if I enter United States, that is a nationality that is acceptable here. In this case, you would get additional questions on what kind of document you have to stay in the Netherlands as a US citizen. Of course, most of the applicants will have Netherlands or Nederlandse nationality, as it is shown here. The value from the middleware here would just be a 3-letter ISO code, like NLD or something. Of course, we want to show a nice text like Nederlandse to the customers that they understand. Other funny fields that are, for example, the prefix of the surname. In this case, it also does autocomplete. For example, if you start entering VA, you get all the typical Dutch surname prefixes like Vander or Vanden, etc., etc. Okay.
And are those prefixes configured in dotCMS, or are those coming from an external system?
These prefixes are coming from an external system in this case, yeah.
Okay, great.
But for example, the nationalities are configured in dotCMS.
Okay.
Okay, so I think this should be enough to actually kick off the loan application process. Let's accept everything. Okay, maybe I should enter that I have some monthly fees regarding rent, etc. And let's confirm our application. So now dotCMS is going to do a lot of initialization on the middleware. It will create a session in the middleware and transport all the data that has been entered in these two forms into the middleware system. This has happened now. As you are seeing here, there's a wait box coming up that is informing customers of the steps taking place here. Their credit is being scored. In the backend, the middleware is communicating with Experian, with BKR, and with the VIS. This is actually a process that does take some time, since the credit rating agencies do need their time to find these customers in their databases, etc., etc. So we'll just have to wait a little bit. There's an interesting mechanism in place also where we used polling to sync up this user interface with dotCMS. The dotCMS does get a push from the middleware to inform that the process has completed.
Can I ask you a quick question? How long did it actually take you to develop this, and how long have you actually had it implemented?
It has been live since January of this year, approximately.
February.
Okay, that would be fine. February of this year, approximately. The implementation time in dotCMS for the entire solution, including all the configuration, was about 200 hours. The middleware part was bigger, since there's of course a lot of integration with the middleware.
Great.
Do you think that's a long time, Dean, or?
No.
I
think
was it correct, Bart?
That's great.
Okay, so you see that we are now with an approved application. The title here at the top of the page says your application has been approved. There's a counter here that will give us this contract as a download in a few seconds. Here you see that the counter here is now at 0, and we have a contract here which Chrome will open for us. Let's see what the contract looks like. Oh, here it is. Well, it's a direct contract. It has been customized completely for this app. There are even barcodes, etc., for automatic handling when this is sent back. A lot of the data that we entered in the application is rendered back here in the in this contract. So the amounts and the email address, etc., etc. This is a PDF that you as a customer have to sign to finalize your loan agreement. So that's the contract that is produced. The contract is produced with HP Dialog software. This is quite advanced software that is triggered by the middleware to produce this document from a template and the variables that come from dotCMS to the middleware into the PDF. dotCMS is then polling the middleware to see if the contract is ready. It gets a notification of that, and it is then streamed over to browser so that it can display the contract correctly, as you just saw.
And where does this contract end up living after it's created?
After it's created, it's stored on a document location in the middleware. It is bound to the session to download this, so the URL that is used here is only usable during the session. When the session is closed, for example, I close my browser, the contract is still there in the document management directory in the middleware, but is no longer accessible for dotCMS, and neither is it for other customers or people who would be interested in those contracts. The idea is that you will also get the contract emailed to the correct address to be able to review it and sign it. And if it is coming back to LaSer in a signed state, they will be able to set another checkbox in the backend system and then provide you with the loan. So that's the process.
All right, great. Maybe you could show us a little bit more about how this works on the back end of dotCMS.
The fields in the application street that you saw, they can be reordered using the relations mechanism in dotCMS. Of course, it gives great power to the marketing department that want to change the order, etc., etc. In this case, the module is just rendered directly from dotCMS, and then we are using jQuery to attach the right events to certain fields in this application street. The mechanism of attaching behavior to the fields and the control from dotCMS are separate from each other, so you can do whatever you like with the ordering in dotCMS and the application street, and the behavior on specific fields will just keep working using the hooks that jQuery uses for that.
Do you want to step into the widget and show the attendees a little bit about how you made this form work?
You should go to the velocity folder.
Yeah. So we are about to go into the VTL file that the wizard is using, the widget, sorry, is using. So let's take a look at the renderengine.vtl file and edit the text. Here you see that we have an application util.init application call here. This is using a view tool that we have the code here in an editor. So the init is actually what initializes the communication with the backend, the middleware system. In this case, it creates what we call an anonymous facade. Anonymous as customers, while they are filling in this application street, they are still anonymous. We also have facades for things like logged in customers, etc. That's in this case it's an anonymous facade. And this actually kicks off the initialization of the middleware. Let's see here. Init application is what is called when you actually initialize an application and click to submit to start the application process. And we also have here start new application, which is actually the core of the process to work on a new application. Here, for example, you see that we use the anonymous facade, create a new one, and do an init call to the middleware, and we are also returning values to dotCMS from this view tool to work with that.
That's great.
Okay.
And how many different middlewares are you actually communicating with during this application process?
Well, there's a communication with one piece of middleware, but the middleware then is talking with, I think, in total 3 or 4 different backend systems to determine the scoring on the application.
Could you show us a little bit about how you're constructing the form in Velocity, and also maybe a little bit of the jQuery and how you're controlling the form?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look at the Velocity file that actually renders the fields in the application module. That's this one here. In its base, this is actually just a loop that is doing the work here, creating the different types of fields. So we have a text field renderer, we have a postal code field renderer that has a very specific postal code formatting. We also have little VTL files that do things like rendering date and select fields. So those little VTL files, they only render one line in the application street every time, and together they are just looping through all the available content in the application street to display it. Then we hook on the jQuery logic to drive the right behavior in the browser. We can also have a look at the jQuery stuff, as you asked, Dean. I think it would be good to ask my colleague Bart for that, since he worked on all the jQuery and the entire front-end development for this application module. So let's go into the application, or back into the dotCMS admin, and let's take a look at the JavaScripts, Bart.
Okay.
And hello, Bart.
Hello. Okay, so I'm going to take you guys into the JavaScript part of the rendering the application. Here we have the application formatters.js file. This file is used to define all the formatting behavior that is done on the fields. I will open it up in editor so you can see it.
Bart, so what is this JavaScript file doing, and how is it controlling your form?
Yeah, this JavaScript file is defining all the behavior that has to do with formatting the fields. For example, if certain fields should have uppercase formatting, then when a customer enters the data, it automatically converts the data to uppercase. This is this method. The init is called by when the form is rendered in the browser. So each function can be called by jQuery. The init here is initializing all the behavior on the fields. And all the fields have a certain class on them that is used. You can style things on them, but you can also put jQuery behavior on it. For example, you see here uppercase. So all fields that have the class uppercase get this behavior. And this basically says if you put something in it, when the value is changed of the field, it goes to uppercase. And it's the same for initials. We have formatter, and this is kind of a special formatter because it removes diacritics from the input from the customer. So if you have a name with weird characters, with E with 2 dots on it, it removes it, or it replaces it by a normal E.
Yeah.
Furthermore, let's see what we have.
So those are all the That's where it's handling all the prefixes, huh?
Yeah, this is something with the prefix indeed. There is, for the surname, there's a special case. In the old application, if you typed your surname prefix and your surname in the surname field, it split it to the surname prefix part and put that in the surname prefix field, and the surname was put in the surname field. So that is something we have done with jQuery also here.
So if you're entering Van de and then your last name, it detects the fact that Van de should actually be a prefix instead of part of your last name, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you handle the validation with what the XML that you're actually pulling down and you're integrating with your form? How do you handle validation? What if something doesn't match up with something from an XML feed?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, since it is of course really important that the application module that you configure in dotCMS matches with what you do or what the middleware expects, and you want to see that right away. So not something that maybe one field is missing and the middleware fails on submit. No. So what we did is that we built a velocity file there, check configuration.vtl. That's the one here. Take a look at it. It's also open in Notepad++, so that you can see it a little better. So this VTL file, it actually checks the setup in dotCMS and compares it with what is necessary according to the configuration XML of the module that's coming from the backend. And if there are errors in it, it creates a list that is shown in the front end right away. So if there are fields missing, there are mandatory, we show a list instead of the rendered application module that tells you something like, okay, there are fields missing from this application suite. You really should add something like last name. You can't leave last name out. The middleware will not accept that. And that is something that's handled in this velocity file, and it is thus also done by dotCMS. The validation process and the comparison is performed in dotCMS in velocity code here. Yep.
All right, that's great. Could you tell me, how do you, since you're communicating with external systems, they've got their own validation. What if you get an error message from your external system that you're communicating with? Maybe it's down or something like that. What do you do with the messaging? Because I assume that you don't want to show that kind of messaging to your front-end users.
No, that's right, and that's also why we put that into content as well in this project. Of course, indeed, as you say, the middleware can have issues with calling one of the credit rating agencies or doing scoring, or maybe it's in batch mode, etc. In that case, it gives us back an error number that's coming through the view tool and coming back into dotCMS, where we match it in content. So the error messages are also one of the types of content in this project. Let's take a look at it. It's here in content as the content type is foutmelding. That's Dutch for error. But here you see all the different error codes and the text that correspond with them. A lot of them are relating to validation that the middleware is doing in addition to all the jQuery validation that Bart already showed. There are others there as well, stating something like, well, 504 is a bad middleware error. You can't do an application at this moment, but please give us a call at this phone number to complete your application. In this case, we can't do much more than just show a phone number. But yeah,
but
you can have a...
That's a lot nicer than just showing some random, messaging on the screen. Being able to control.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely, and you don't want to lose your customers here, of course. So
yeah.
This works quite fine.
And your marketers are able to even control the messaging this way, right?
Exactly, and if they want a different phone number, they can just change it here, and they don't have to bother the middleware guys that actually maybe then had to introduce some kind of new error code or a new error text. So that's not what you want. It's just content, and it should be in .cms.
That's great. This is great. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you really leveraged dotCMS to make this happen, and how this application process, the actual implementation of it, was made easier? What did you most enjoy about using dotCMS to make this application process happen and get it live on the client site?
Yeah, it is. It has been a very nice project to develop, and the client is also very happy with the end result. And I think powerful things from dotCMS that we leveraged is the fact that you can structure your content really well. So things like a structure for the questions in an application street, and the fact that you can work with the relationships between them. But also what we as a Java and middleware development company really like is the extensibility of it. So just creating some velocity files in there, but then hooking into view tools where we can just work in Java and do powerful things like asynchronous messaging with the middleware from the view tool, and then getting back to dotCMS through velocity and using middleware data, do translations and fixing ugly things from the middleware in a nice way that's also configurable. That has been very powerful in this project, I think, and the end result is an application process that you can use for quite some time. I envision, or I think, LaSer will be using these application modules for quite some years, and working in dotCMS. Their marketing department will be working in dotCMS and configuring small things. But we, as Isaac, will also be able to do more complex things for them in dotCMS using velocity, etc., without having to do code rules all the time. In addition, what was really important is that the fact that we could load balance this entire solution over two nodes in this case. We've done performance tests using JMeter, actually going with tens of thousands of visitors on the landing pages, and then subsets of them into the application street, filling in this module, submitting data to the middleware, and it's just running very, very fine, very quickly, and we haven't had any major issues. While I think we've kept costs quite within reasonable range for our clients by using open source things like just a normal Apache software load balancer in front of it. So nothing very special or expensive there. And this, I think, has proven very, very valuable to our customer.
Well, that's great. I think what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and open it up. I see that there are some questions in the GoToMeeting control panel, so we'll go ahead and open it up to our attendees and let them ask you some questions about your application. Would that be all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Would be happy to answer questions.
And then
Yeah, we can.